But first, having told us for months about the dire budgetary position, the single biggest flaw in Treasurer Jim Chalmers' first budget last night was that he did nothing to fix it. Much of the temporary windfall gain from sky-high prices we're getting for our export resources was lavished on Labor's election promises to boost aged care, childcare, social housing and Medicare, all consumed by an out-of-control NDIS. Based on last night's dreadfully mediocre effort, the government's got no plan whatsoever to address the 50% $50 billion structural deficit. That's the built-in gap between existing spending commitments and likely government revenues. After an entirely serendipitous dip, the forecast deficit is greater at the end of Labor's forward estimates period than the Coalition's just a few months back, and net debt's tipped to increase by almost $200 billion over the next 4 years. The budgetary position over the next decade is now even worse than expected under the former government, because Labor's baking in permanently higher spending on all of its social programs. The two fastest growing items by far are the NDIS and our interest payments on the national debt. A reminder again to my viewers tonight that just like you pay interest on what you've borrowed to buy a home, so too does your government when it borrows for the budget. And by mid-decade, so in about a couple of years' time, that interest bill will cost taxpayers $33 billion a year. $33 billion a year. Just like your mortgage too, of course, interest is dead money. It doesn't pay off the capital. It just keeps the debt collector from your door, and in Australia's case, much of that debt is owed offshore. Add in the NDIS that's set to grow by almost 14% a year over the forward estimates to around $50 billion annually by mid-decade. Already it's bigger than Medicare. You can see why the Treasurer needed to do more last night than just fiddle around the edges. To keep our head above water, the Albanese government has some tough choices. Does it raise taxes after promising in the election it wouldn't, or deal with this structural baked-in spending we can't afford? Now, Jim Chalmers will tell you we just need to grow the economy faster. Yet there was nothing in the budget that would foster economic growth, and much in Labor's other plans that'll in fact hinder it. To start with, there's the surrender to the ACTU on industry-wide bargaining and hence industry-wide strikes. Now, this will mean more strikes, more disruption, issues with our supply chain and of course lower productivity. Then there's Labor's ongoing fixation with climate and consequent obsessions with renewable energy. Labor wants to blame Putin's war for the coming 50% plus hike in power prices over the next year and beyond. And so much for that pre-election pledge to cut your power bills. That's not going to happen. But it's really this all too rapid transition to renewables that's to blame, because they always need backing up, and we've gone out of our way to demonise backup options like gas or to prohibit others like nuclear. Here was the Business Council Chief, Jennifer Westacott, today on this very point.
It's about making sure that we don't get rid of systems until we've replaced them. And this is what's happened in Europe. People have got rid of things before replacements were in place, and that's why gas is important. But whilst ever this debate continues to be an ideological battle about types of fuel sources we don't like, as opposed to what's the task, reduce emissions, maintain affordability and reliability, we're not going to kind of make progress here.
It's renewables without any baseload plan B that's caused costs to skyrocket in Europe and reliability fall away. A further consequence of Labor's emissions obsession is that it'll be all but impossible to open new coal mines and new gas fields needed to keep up fossil fuel exports that have, as you saw last night, boosted the budget and are Australia's principal means of paying our way in the world. So your cost of living's up thanks to inflation hitting almost 8%. Your real wages are down because they can't keep pace with inflation without locking it in. Your house, well, that'll be worth less if you're a buyer, and your rent's going to cost you more if you're not. Plus, power prices up 50% plus. With all that destruction of jobs, particularly for small business, and no structural reform from a PM and a Treasurer that on last night's evidence think that more spending and bigger government is the answer to every problem. It should be a target-rich situation for an opposition that's on the ball. Let's see what Peter Dutton can manage tomorrow with his budget reply speech.